Okay, Annalise has disappeared. Starting just now, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Omni CBR workshop for FSPs. I'm Charene Nortier, and I am from the Conduct of Business Supervision Division. I'm really pleased to welcome you to this workshop. I see we already have more than 300 people who've joined us, which is fantastic. We are hoping that more people will be joining us. Just a couple of practical things before we get into the meat of the discussion. Your microphones are muted. When you want to participate and you want to participate verbally, please put up your hand. So under the reactions, just raise your hand and we will then give you an opportunity to participate. We will unmute your mic from our side. We will then indicate to you that you are unmuted and you will then be able to mute. To unmute yourself and be able to speak. Can I just check, can everyone hear me? Because I'm getting messages that there's no sound, but the sound is on from my side. Aniki? Okay, I get some people who say they can hear. Excellent, thank you very much. I was getting very worried about that. And then some people say no sound. Just check the sound system on your computer. It might be a setting on your side. I know sometimes I mute the sound because the notifications on emails get quite annoying and then in a meeting you forget to unmute the sound. So you can participate in one of two ways. You can raise your hand, and I see hands are raised. We'll give you a chance just now. And you can also use the chat function. So we will be monitoring both the hands that are raised as well as the chat function and do our best to address all of the questions like that. I think before we go into more detail, we've got quite a lot of people raising their hands. Let me go to the first person. Anniki Jooste, you should be able to unmute and just talk.
Baie dankie, ek kan jou veilig jou hoor, dankie.
Dankie Anniki. Thanks. Yuri.
I just also raised my hand that I could hear you okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If you raised your hands because you indicated that you can hear me, will you please drop your hand so that I can just see who's left and who has a practical question at this stage? Okay, excellent. It seems as people were just raising their hands to say that they could hear me. So now you can see how the microphone function works as well. We monitor, we watch our screens, we see your hand is up. We will then unmute your mic from our side. You will then unmute on your side and you will then be able to participate and speak. And as I said, we do watch this. We have Akashan with us who helps us to monitor the attendance and the participants as well. And he jumps in when there is a practical problem. So between us, hopefully we can make sure that this is a seamless experience for you. So I have a number of colleagues with me. I've mentioned Akashan. We also have Juanita, and we have other colleagues on the call, Alma, Martha, etc. And they will all be helping us to monitor the questions and pitch in with answering your questions, because today really is about your questions and your comments and giving you an opportunity to participate. We are scheduled for 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and I am planning to take a break at about 11:30, which should be about halfway through the program. So just to give everyone a chance to stretch their legs, catch their breath, get some coffee and carry on then. So 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock is all booked out for you. I hope you've managed to do the same. If you have to, as a result of load shedding, go in and out of the meeting, just join us again when you have power restored, and you should be able to do that. We are also working with our internal ICT department, and we are hoping to host all of the workshop recordings on the FSCA YouTube channel. We will unfortunately only be able to sort out whether this is possible next week on Wednesday. Our last workshop is on Tuesday next week. So the ICT department can then on Wednesday tell us whether there is enough bandwidth to host all of the workshops. I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Manas Malimabe, who has just joined us on the screen. And Manas is the head of department for the financial advisors and intermediaries at the FSCA. And that's the FSPs. So Manas, thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to hand over to Manas to do the official introduction and welcome. Thank you, Manas. Over to you.
Thank you, Charene, and thank you and everyone who attended this important session, which session, of course, will be to work the Omni CBR. I must state also that this is the second session that we held. In this respect, we had one yesterday, which was quite interactive and fruitful, and we've gained quite a lot of issues from issues raised by the participant in that workshop. Now, the concept of CBR is not necessarily new. As you will recall that it has always been a requirement in terms of the FICE Act, in terms of Section 17 for compliance reports to be submitted. Now, it should be important that at that stage, the FSP, which is now FSCA, was structured in terms of silos of sector laws. And there has been a transition from a sector law silos into a functional silos. And that actually prompted us to consider the issue of having Omni CBR that would be overarching in terms of all the regulated entities. Now, the reality is that prior to or during the FSP days, when departments, of course, were, as I said, structured in sector law, you would have an insurance division, FICE division, pensions division, and so forth. Now, the transition into this new environment meant that the supervision or any activity would be based on an entity that is supervised rather than on a sector law. So, which means, let's say from a sector, a supervision point of view, you all know that, or you may not be aware, because I see some still think that we are based on sector law structures. That is, departments are based on the entities that they supervise. You'd have a department that deals with insurers, and you'll have a department that deals with investment providers, Cat 2s and banks as such. But that does not necessarily mean that we supervise in terms of sector law, but anyone who supervises a bank, for instance, or an insurer, for instance, is responsible for all the applicable laws to that particular entity that is being supervised. You will realize now that's a dramatic shift from the past. Now, that's probably one of the issues that made us to rethink this issue of reporting to us. In 2017 or 2018, we issued a draft conduct of business return for the industry's input. And the inputs and comments received form the basis of the questions in this Omni CBR. Now, as opposed to the erstwhile compliance reports, which were more of a ticker box nature, the Omni CBR is a quantitative report that will be faster to complete. And there is a phased-in period, and you can either submit through XML and systems or manually on the web-based form on the website. That was just in a nutshell what this workshop is going to deal with in the next 2 to 3 hours. And I can head over to Charene to proceed with the granular details of what is contained in the CBR, Omni CBR reports. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manas. I really appreciate your welcome and introduction. We want to tell everyone participating in today's session that you are incredibly welcome to share your ideas and share your comments. But before we go into that, we've received feedback in other workshops as also individual calls from people that they were battling to customize the Omni CBR and look at the tabs that are relevant to their specific business. Akashan is going to just take us through how do you change the Omni CBR spreadsheet so that you can see all the tabs if you are one of the people who have been struggling to customize it. So I'm just going to hand over to Akashan, and then I'm also going to ask him afterwards to just post the process into the chat box so that those of you who find it a little bit fast to follow the explanation can then follow it from the chat function as well. Akashan, can I hand over to you?
Sure. Thanks, Charene. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen to take you through the process of enabling the macros on Excel. So yesterday we also received a question from somebody wanting to know where they can find the Omni CBR spreadsheet to have a look at it on the website. So I'll take you right from the start. So on our homepage, we will click on regulatory frameworks, and then we've hosted it on 2 places. One is industry communication and the other one is documents for consultation. So we'll go to documents for consultation and we'll go to general legislation. And then if you click on a little plus sign there, you'll find the first subfolder says communication 16 of 2022. If you click on that, it's gonna open up a folder for you. It's supposed to, okay, something seems to went wrong with that one. Let me go access it from the other side. So under industry communication, you will find, again, you will find general. You click on general, you'll go to FSCA communication and the folder is there 16 of 2022. If you click on that one, okay, and then a folder will open up for you and it'll show you 3 attachments in there. The first one is the Annexure A. If you click on the Annexure A, Then you'll find the orange ribbon on top that says enable editing. You click on that. Okay, and then you should be able to start editing your document. So when it comes to the company information, we've realized that if you do select your type of customers, and if you select both, and if you select over here financial advisor, the spreadsheet's supposed to open up further below line 26, but it doesn't do that. And if you click on customize, you get a message that says you need to enable the macro on your Excel. So in order for you to do that, you will click on File, you'll go to Options, you'll go to Trust Center, and then you'll click on Trust Center Settings. Then you'll go to the Macro Settings, and then you'll click on Enable the VBA macros. Right, once you've done that, you will also click on Trust the access to the VBA project object, and then you click OK. Okay, then you need to save the spreadsheet. And when you do save it, you can either make your own folder or you can save it on the desktop. It'll make it easy for you to find it. So I'm going to save mine on the desktop. And then you will save it as Excel macro enabled workbook. Right. Okay, then if you go to your desktop, you'll find the document on your desktop with a little exclamation mark on it. If you click on that document, right, and then if you select again financial advisor, okay, something happened today. Okay, it somehow didn't save my settings. Guys, I apologize for that. Can we carry on with the workshop, Charene, and then I will see what happened and I'll come back and I'll demonstrate it again.
Perfect. Thank you, Akash. And we also have some questions from people asking to just repeat it slowly. So I think if you can post the instructions in the chat function as well, then people can just refer to that. But we will come back shortly. It just goes to show, with the best intentions of the world, something will go wrong. I had exactly the same problem with my spreadsheet initially, and by following these steps, I've been able to unblock all of the instructions, and my macros are enabled, and my spreadsheet now works. So unfortunately, I can't share my screen, but we do have the spreadsheet with both myself and Juanita open. And if you have questions, we should be able to go for that. Fred, we note that it is very fast. We are going to be putting the instructions in the chat function. So just bear with us for a couple of minutes, and then you will have the instructions to follow. So if you have any questions or any comments at this stage, those of you who have had a chance to watch any of the 3 webinars that we've hosted, you're most welcome to start with your questions. So just for those of you who have missed it, we recorded and we hosted 3 webinars on the content and the approach to the Omni CBR. Those webinars are available on the FSCA's YouTube channel. The first webinar, we unpacked the legislative framework and the background. Then we also had a second workshop, a webinar, where we unpacked the sheets that applies to everyone, regardless of the type of notification or license that you have. And the third webinar that we hosted, and it is still available, we looked at the sheets that are specific just for your type of license. So if you have an FSP license, then there are sheets that are specific only to you. So you would complete the sheets that applies to everyone, and then 1 extra sheet as an FSP, as a category 1 or 4 FSP. If you have a category 2 or 3 license, then you would also complete the sheets for the investment providers. So just on the instructions, give me 1 second. I just want to check with Akash whether he is able to just go through the instructions again. Okay, so Akash says he's just fixing it. John, I do understand, but at the same time, if we have a problem, we work to fix it, and we will make sure that you have the instructions as well. So we will be hosting the instructions for fixing the macro problem in the chat function. And if anyone needs us to email it to them, or you would be able to just copy it from the chat function to a document on your own side. But if you still have a need for the instructions afterwards, you can send us an email, and we will then make sure that you have the instructions to enable the macros as well. Just on the comment that Manas made in the introduction on the feedback on the contents of the Omni CBR. We have a space on the website where you can comment, and Juanita will talk about how the comments are going to be working a little bit later during the workshop as well. But just to remind everyone that you have until the 10th of August to send us your specific comments, and we are very interested. So regardless of whether you are talking just on behalf of your own FSP, or you are perhaps responding on behalf of a larger group of FSPs, or a compliance practice, or an industry association, we would be very interested in your feedback. And I see Juanita is ready to just pick up on this conversation. Juanita, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charene. And at that moment, our load shedding kicked in, but the generator will come on just now. So I think there's just a few things that we've learned from other workshops, and maybe to address also some of the comments that I'm seeing. So maybe as a beginning, I'm Juanita Smit. I work in the Conduct of Business Supervision Division of the FSCA, and I was involved in leading this project with the Omni CBR, with the experts of the various sectors to assist in compiling this return. So as Manas indicated, this is going to be a strong off-site monitoring tool for us. It's cross-cutting over a few industries, so it's not just your industry, but it's also pension funds, and insurance and banks. All of them have to complete the Omni CBR. And if you watch the webinar, you'll know that there are some all sheets that need to be completed by all the entities across the sectors. That is necessary to use the information to do some benchmarking on. And also to look at trends in the industry to see whether a group is moving in a specific direction altogether according to their strategy, or whether certain entities in a group are moving to another strategy. It's important for risk rating entities. It's also important for us to update our data that we have on the system, so that we don't have to do cleanup processes on data. Also, that one of the things that we've realized, one of the biggest risks, or that a lot of there's an obligation on you to update certain information with us timeously, and that is the biggest non-compliance that we have found. And with the return and the information, for instance, on the company information sheet that you would be completing, we would have up-to-date, accurate data and actually assist you with your own compliance. Now, before I go into some of the general things that I just want to touch on, if I look at the notes, so there's nothing wrong with the return and the functionality of the return. What we were trying to explain is that there might be a setting on your computer that won't allow you to see everything on the return, and that setting needs to be rectified. Because of the fact that we realize everyone does not have an IT department that might assist them, and people like myself are not great with technology at all. So luckily my return worked perfectly from the beginning, and I didn't need to follow steps. That is why we have that in this session. And that is why we'll have the instructions on the notes. And if you're in the session is being recorded, and you can download it yourself. Otherwise, you're welcome to email us and we'll send you the instructions. It seems very long and daunting, but it's actually like 5 steps that you need to do. But for someone like me, that is a lot. So John, I completely understand that that you get frustrated by this. The moment that I see something is not working, I actually just want to leave it as well. But maybe you're lucky and actually on your computer there's no issues, and you can just proceed with customizing the return. Today's session is really about the contents of the return. So we know this is, although we've asked this information to you in the past and we've asked it in different ways, this is a new way of reporting. It's a market conduct return, and that is what we're expecting as a market conduct regulator from the industry. We took into account that there is different levels of data maturity in the different sectors, and even in the sectors amongst different entities. And that is why we really try to make it for some sectors a lighter version than for other sectors. So for instance, the only sector currently reporting on conduct of business is the insurance sector. And a lot of you work with insurers, so you already knew that you had to get some of the data ready for them and they have to report on it. And now you're going to have to report on it yourself for your own FSP license. And they've been reporting on it for 4 years, and it took us a long time to get it totally implemented. And it took us a long time for them to also see the value in it, because although I've explained some of the values for us as a market conduct regulator, also trying to get some of the field level to check some of the compliance, to have one report that you do, to have it's streamlined, to have it timelessly and that the times are the same. Although we try to cater for big organizations and smaller organizations in the way that you're submitting. So, and that's what Manas touched on. The XML codes are really for the more tech savvy guys and the bigger organizations to submit it, and it's an automatic submission every time. For the smaller guys, it will be a web-based submission. So you'll log onto the portal, you'll see it as an Excel sheet as you see it now, you'll customize it, you can complete it. A few people can complete the same return, so you can share it, you can go in and out, and then you only submit it once done. With this return, there's no uploading of documents. Certain questions has a yes and no answer. Others are all numbers that you'll be compiling together. If I think of some of the other questions that we've had in some of the other workshops to maybe just also assist with that, we have a terminology sheet. On the terminology sheet, we didn't try and give a description or a definition for every word used in this return. We did try in the beginning. We had about 300 descriptions, and then we cut it down. In your act that you work with and under which you're registered, you do understand certain concepts. We don't have to explain to you what is a representative. That is something that you know. So we didn't, if there are terminology used in the return that is in your legislation and that you are aware of, you understand, we didn't try and explain it. The terminology sheet only has descriptions on where we're using a word that isn't in legislation, and we're putting it in there as an additional guide to try and help you answer the question so that you can understand what it is that we're asking. So it's just like a guideline. The legislation applicable to you would still apply that you are licensed under now. And we can look at adding to the terminology, but we've also seen the more terminology you have, the more confusion you can actually cause. But we did see in yesterday's session, there might be 1 or 2 of the phases or phrases used in the questions that we can try and better explain. We also try to get the questions as clear as possible. So that is about the terminology sheet. When we look at the phasing period for everyone that didn't maybe look at the roadmap completely, the roadmap says this is a 4-year rollout. This is what we're planning to do. We are partners in this journey. And that is why we really wanted to hear from everyone. Not that this can't be done and this is impossible and this is going to take system work. That is true, because that is true on our side too. We have to get more resources. We had to do a lot of system development over the last few years. We have to do even more system development. We have 14,000 returns that are going to come in, and we need to be able to have the systems and the resources to really analyze that data and give feedback into the industry, to really look at an entity that from one quarter to the next quarter, what happened to your business? And this is how it's going to add to your bottom line and understanding your business. Where's the gaps in your controls? Where is there a gap in the market that you should actually maybe look into? Is what you're selling now appropriate for your target market? Do you know your target market? And that is why we have a segmentation for target market, that we need to be able to do it into peer groupings. When we look at products and we ask about the size of your book so that we can do peer groupings on you as an entity and see, are you an outlier in any aspect versus your competitors? Is some of the answers that you're giving maybe not in line with our expectation and we don't understand it? And then we can have more fruitful engagements. So that's the type of feedback that you can expect in the beginning, is we're going to have those engagements when there's outliers. This is not the only thing that we're going to look at, but it's an important supervisory tool, off-site monitoring supervisory tool, that will help us with our limited resources to actually look better at the market, do more predictive analysis, be more proactive, be more intrusive, but also assist you more. Because when there is then a problem in your business, we'll also be able to see it. And we can see how can we then have that engagement and actually assist you and say, we think there might be a lack in control. So you are an outlier in this area. Did you know that? Also, this will assist you in giving better service to your clients, but also to your third parties who outsource functions to you or have other types of agreements with you, because they need to do reporting now. And they can't deal with entities that can't do this type of reporting. We have our legal team here, and I know the question comes up regularly, do we have the right to ask these questions? In what legal framework is it? Is it not too personal? And before I'm going to give them an opportunity just to answer this, and this is just because we know these are the questions that are being asked. We want to address them and we want to give you that comfort. We also try to do that in the roadmap and in the webinar. But before I give them a chance, when we look at the market segmentation we used on the retail side, which is age, we came up with that after various workshops. And believe me, if you think you can fight for your sector, you haven't seen the experts in the FSCA fight for their sectors about what would be a reasonable indicator and what not. And we needed to find something that would work across the industry in the different sectors. We needed to find something that you would have, that in terms of the POPIA Act, you would need, in terms of not trying to go back to your client every year so that you can update it, but that you could actually have it on an ongoing basis. And that's why we chose age on the retail side, because you would have an ID number or a date of birth. Yes, again, you might not have the data we need in the way that we need it, but you do have it. And that is why we're giving this a few years for a rollout, and not expecting you to do full and complete reporting by even next year. We're going to do it on a best effort basis. We're going to sit with you, we're going to work with you. We're going to have, this is a workshop. We have the webinars, we have the roadmap. We're inviting people to have individual meetings with us before you give your comments. And also then thereafter, as the rollout goes, there's a pilot that you can volunteer to participate in, because the second phase, when the pilot comes in, is when we're going to look at the practicality and the cost of implementing it, and really how much time do we need to implement it. So it's really a very robust consultative process. So yes, you're going to do some system work, and even when you work out of the boot of your car, you're going to be able to answer most of these questions because you have the information already. The same on the business side, when we asked about the annual turnover and the fund value, we don't make a differentiation between commercial and corporate. We only call it business. And so retail is any individual, any natural person. And then businesses would fall under business, and you would categorize them in that order. And that would be in order, you would have that detail on the business side. Again, something that you would have and that you would have going forward on an ongoing basis, because it's about knowing your customer. And you are our customers. So we need to know and understand you and understand what obstacles you have and understand what's going on in the industry, so that we can also protect the customers that you deal with, because that is our mandate as a market conduct regulator. So that explains how we came up with that segmentation, and that's also necessary to be able to do the benchmarking that we need to do and give that feedback. And you would want to know that the playing fields are getting level. And some of the questions that we're asking about charges and fees and commission on here would also indicate to us if there's any possible contraventions of the commission regulations. If any entities are getting fees for doing the same thing you're doing, but it's totally exorbitant fees, why is that happening? And that is why we're getting the return from each part of the sector and then also seeing the cost to the customer in its full form. So that is the reasoning behind this. We did do a lot of consultation, not just internally, also externally with the World Bank. We customized it for South Africa based on the risks that we know there are. There's many more. It came out in yesterday's discussion as well that we could ask a lot more questions here, but we kept proportionality in mind. And therefore, we only asked what we know is very relevant now and would help us identify the highest risks. And then we'll work on this together in phases. And that's why in this session, what we really want is, if something is not working, give us a suggestion on how it could work better. But know that we are going to have this return. Know that it is going to be for value for you. It's going to be value for your industry in terms of competition. It's going to be valuable in terms of understanding customers. It's going to protect customers more, give them a fair outcome, because a lot of these indicators also show on culture. And sometimes when you're the smaller player, it's very difficult to change a culture of other outsourced partners that you're dealing with and the way that they expect you to deal. And that is why this is rolling out across the industry. And we're going to move this entire, I said in the other sessions also, this Titanic, we're moving together, but we need everyone to actually take hands and come up with suggestions to make it more effective. But yes, we're very excited about it. And every question that we're asking in here, we are definitely going to use the information. And that's why we also need time for rollout. Like I said, we've done a lot of work already. We've been testing some of the dashboards and the reports on the information we got from the insurance industry in the last 4 years. But this is a mammoth task. And it's difficult to get questions that will work across the industry and still show you all of those risks across the industry. And then you have your sheet that is applicable to your sector. And that is mostly based on a lot of the things that you have in your compliance reports, but it's about your licensing and it's about your agreements, and it's going to be faster to complete and it's faster for us to analyze. And in the beginning in the rollout, you might be giving it on a biannual basis, but the idea is to get this to a quarterly stage where you will be submitting it at the end within a month after the end of the calendar quarter. Everyone will be submitting it at the same time, and you'll get into it that you only have to customize it once, and the information will either then draw automatically or you will then complete it. And yes, it is a change, but it's a change that will assist all players in the market. Okay, so that's some of the questions that I know that was going to come up and that we could have discussed. I also think maybe we should just, before we go to all the comments and the questions, deal with the legal aspect around this, because our legal eagles do have to leave at 12 o'clock. And although I can try and explain it to you, you will find many gaps in my explanation. So I think it's better to leave it to Lizanne to just explain the framework, how this fits in, how nothing that you're going to do here is not going to fit into the bigger framework and COFI where we're going to. No effort is going to be unnecessary. And that, yes, we're not going over the boundaries of any of our legal powers. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. Paul and Jackie, we see your hands. We haven't forgotten about you. We are just going to ask Lizanne to quickly give the legal framework, because we know that she has other commitments to join as well, and we would like to just position that as well. So, Lizanne, if you are able to, thank you very much.
Morning, everyone, and thanks again also from my side to everyone who took the time to. Can you hear me? Took the time to attend. We really value your participation and inputs. I personally share your sentiments. It was also daunting for me when I first got introduced to the Omni CBRs, but you are in very capable hands. And you have, you must please bear in mind that the FSCA has the best intentions with regards to supporting your businesses, but also protecting customers, which is our legislative mandate. So thinking about that, I also saw that there's a lot of comments, some comments regarding the terminology. Please do need to comment to us if you do not understand a specific term or you think that it's misplaced. I think Juanita did mention at the beginning, the terminology is intended to clarify what it is that we're asking. It is not legally binding. It's not a law. It's an explanation. We do rely strongly on the existing definitions because this is cross-sectoral. So as it is applicable to all the sectors or most of the sectors that we regulate, it cross-references your act. So for purposes of today's session, the FSPs Act would be very important and the definitions in there. And only where a definition has a different meaning or we have a different message that we're trying to get from it, it's included in the definition sheet. But please do comment on it. I see there's a comment, maybe I can just say, Charene, there's a comment, and I think it was asked earlier, outlier. I think, Juanita, you use the word often, so maybe you can explain it. It's not a legal term. It's more a term that us as the regulators maybe just use to reference, where we see that something is maybe a little bit out of kilter, but I'm going to leave that to Juanita to respond to because it's not a legal term and it's also not a term in the sheet. Maybe just regarding our powers to ask this, as you regulated entities, you might be familiar with the fact that in terms of the FSPs Act, Section 17 of the FSPs Act, we are empowered to require reporting from financial service providers. We are also empowered in terms of the FSR Act to request specific information from regulated entities and basically in support of our mandate and what it is that we're trying to do. So again, as Charene and Juanita said, all this information is very valid in terms of our risk-based approach and supervision, and that's why we're requesting it. And then also you may have heard of the Conduct of Financial Institutions Bill that's under development. That is the consolidated bill that's going to replace the existing sectoral laws in future. So once the Conduct of Financial Institutions Bill come in effect, this reporting will be prescribed in terms of that for the financial sector. So we are empowered currently, but in future, the empowerment will sit in terms of the COFI Act. So maybe just to clarify that, if there are any other legal questions or terminology related questions, please do send that through and we're happy to take that. Thank you, Charene. Thank you, Juanita. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Lizanne. I really appreciate that. Juanita, just before we give Paul and Jackie a chance to speak, they've been waiting very patiently. Could you just explain outlier, please?
Thanks, Charene. Thank you, Lizanne. So I see actually you and Louisa answered quite well there in the chat box. So yes, it is a term we use. So when we do the peer grouping, and peer grouping we do in terms of what is the services that you're providing and the size of your book. Of course, that can be refined even further to put you then in a peer. And let's say in that peer grouping, we ask a question about your complaints. How many complaints have you received? And you receive 3 times more than anyone else in your peer grouping, and it's all about service. We're going to have the discussion with you. We're not taking action against you. We're having a discussion with you about why. You're an outlier because you're totally above the average, or what we're seeing in the industry regarding service with complaints. Do you know what it is about? How can we assist? How can we make this service better? And that is also to the question about how is this going to add to your business. So a lot of this information is information that you should be having as an entity in this industry, because you need to know your customers, you need to know what they're complaining about, you need to know how quickly are you dealing with it, how efficient is your processes. And even if you're a smaller entity dealing a one-man show, because I see that comment a lot about a one-man show that has to deal with all its customers, we have to protect and make sure that customers are treated the same. So whether I mean, if you go on leave for 2 weeks and no one looks at a claim or a complaint, you have no way of dealing with that. You didn't inform your customers, they're waiting, then they start complaining. You're getting more and more complaints about service because you went on leave and they had no idea and they still had a claim and they didn't have an alternative. That's something we need to improve. And that's also a reputational risk then for the product provider. In terms of costs and systems, this is going to be a costly exercise. How much cost would depend on how good your records and your data is up to date. It's not more paperwork because you're not doing compliance reports anymore. You haven't been doing compliance reports since 2018. You'll do financial statements and you'll do this return, and that's why we're trying to streamline it into one return. The functionality on this return does not allow you to, when you customize, see it that you have your different tabs that are specific for your additional business composition sheets. So if you're more than one category FSP, or if you're an insurer or a bank and you're an FSP, and that is something that we'll deal with in phase 2 when we look at the practicality of the return, when we do the pilots. But yes, we do take note. If you're, for instance, a micro insurer, you will be doing the return as a micro insurer. All the information you complete on the all sheets is your responsibility as all. As the micro insurer, and the information, because it comes from an entity side, would be the same. And then if you're an FSP as well, you actually just need the additional FSP sheet and not having to repeat all the information you have on the all sheets. We didn't want to send it out where we have all the tabs showing, because that would be more than 100 tabs, and that would be very overwhelming. And that's why we want you to customize it, play around with it, look at the questions that are just applicable to you. In terms of the questions that we're asking about gender and I'm totally confusing Charene here now. Sorry, Charene, because she's in control of the comments and making sure that we answer all the comments. And I just skip through them when I get a chance. And then if it links up to anything, and I don't know if Lizanne wants to come in here as well. We thought, and that's why on all the all sheets, we ask about gender, because for us, that is information that you would have from the ID number. It's also a question, if you don't have it, that we need to start asking, because we need to look at inclusion. We need to make sure, and we have to provide information on financial inclusion. You need to see whether there's enough products in the market, whether you're selling enough products in the market for not just the younger market or the older market or the lower income market, but also what we've seen in the last financial studies is that because of COVID, there's been quite a move from females entering the more formal work area, where they used to be their caretakers at home and they didn't do any formal employment. And now they need financial products and they need financial advice. And this type of information is going to show us those gaps without having to do extensive external research. We'll have that information. We'll be able to see it. When it comes to race, that's also to look at your transformation process. And we only ask it for the FSPs when it comes to the service providers that you use. We ask it on the insurance and the banks and those in a little bit more detail about who is their outsourced partners and whether any of those partners have a 51% or more Black-owned entity. So we ask it there, but that is as part of the transformation plan. And that is why when we looked at this return and we actually put it together, it wasn't just about our legal rights, it's also about what is our mandate, what do we need to be able to report on. How are you transforming and how are you filling the gaps for including customers that weren't included before? And do you know, because if you are a one-man show and someone made a remark there about how many reports do we have to read and how much do we have to do, this return is going to give you those answers that you don't have to read many reports. You'll know where your business is. And as soon as we're comfortable with the information and the accuracy and the completeness of it, we can give back aggregated information into the industry, and you would be able to see there is a gap there. Something moved because of COVID or another macroeconomic circumstances, and my company is not keeping up with that. Let me get in line with that. Maybe get product providers that I can link up to, and I can actually provide that service or that product. And that is how you're going to see the value of this return. You might not see it today, but you are going to see it in time. I don't know if Lizanne wants to add anything to that gender and race question, or whether I factually and legally answered it well enough. Thanks.
Thank you. Lizanne, do you want to go ahead?
I'll be very quick. Charene, Juanita, yeah, no, you covered it. Look, I think the importance when it comes to capturing this type of information, and for us, is it also relates to inclusion, diversity and equity, which is part of governance. So you might not see the relevance of this information now, but please remember, this is still consultation. This is not at this stage anything legally binding. We're trying to walk the road with the industry. There's a strong focus internationally on how including different, people from different race groups, social, economic circumstances, genders, all of the things that Juanita mentioned can actually benefit your business, both internally and if you think about your customers. And these are the types of things that we're starting to think about, and that we want you to start thinking about. So that's where the relevance comes in. I hope that just adds to what Juanita said. Thanks, Charene.
Thank you very much, Lizanne. I just want to make a comment on some of the comments in the chat functionality. So there's quite a few comments about the responses to the questions that ask for a date format, but that's not really the right response to the question. Please note that the main purpose of this Omni CBR right now, and the customization that you can do, is for you to get a sense of the questions that we want to ask. So your being able to respond to the questions is less important to us. We haven't finalized that functionality yet. That functionality is going to be built in the future. So we've catered for it, but we haven't finalized it, because right now, as Juanita's also said, and Lizanne just now, this is for you to see the questions so that you can get a sense of what it is that we want you to respond to, and how far or how close is your data in your business to the ability to being able to respond to it. So we're not testing the functionality itself yet. We are only giving you access to the questions. And Juanita, I know you want to pick up on that, but Paul and Jackie have been incredibly patient. So let's go to them, give them a chance, and then we can pick up on this conversation. I also just want to say that in the chat functionality, the whole explanation of how to sort out the macros, Akarshan has posted that, and other colleagues have also given you the links to accessing the reports and also other information that we have available. So if you have more questions around macros or accessing the reports, please post that in the chat function and we can pick that up later. But I want to give Paul a chance, and then Jackie.
Good morning, Charene. Since Billy's not on today, I thought I would step in from the Moonstone side and just comment on the whole thing for the smaller FSPs. Just firstly, that whole issue of enabling macros, you have posted it, and thanks, Akarshan. However, there are people who are not going to have been part of this, the webinars, and have had that information. So that, I think, is something that should actually be on your website alongside the spreadsheet as the information on how somebody can actually open it up and actually see how the thing works. That leads me on to, again, he showed where you'd find the information about the Omni CBR. And if you take a viewpoint of somebody who does not work at the FSCA, your website navigation is really difficult. It doesn't necessarily make sense, because you've got to realize that it's under regulatory frameworks, and then is it under this or something else? So again, you need to consider your end user being your small professional FSP who's coming in for something that they don't do often. So it's not something that they're working with every day, but on a quarterly basis or on biannual or annual basis, they're now having to come in to report. So I think you need to just consider that entity and how you can best support them to make it a lot simpler. Which is why I also raised the issue yesterday about definitions and not expecting a person to have to go and reference another piece of legislation to find out what you mean by fund or instance or whatever the case might be. So I think if you just take that into account, and I know that Juanita, you say that it's going to be quick to complete. It is very quick to complete if you've done it 50 times. But if you are the small professional FSP and you're now doing it once a quarter, every time you start, you're going to start from first principles and you're having to work out what it is I'm having to fit into this information and that information. And until such time as I have built systems, and we haven't touched on the cost of doing all of that, it's going to be a big issue. So it's not a quick entry. It's certainly something that one person entity is going to have to stop and think about what is being asked of me. And that's not, and just take that into account in the amount of information that you're asking. So that's my comment so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I see Juanita is ready to respond to that. And then we're going to give Jackie a chance. And then I see Ian as well. So that's just the sequence in which we'll be dealing with it.
Thank you, Charene. So let me first touch on the fact that, yes, we know in the beginning, I do take that point, Paul, that it is going to be a lot of work to complete. It will be faster after the 50th time, I'm sure. But what we're also building in is the functionality. So if it's the XML submission, obviously that goes fast because that just draws the reports and you have the systems there. And that's why it's a 4-year rollout for the guys that are capable of doing that, because we already gave the XML codes in this return. So yes, there could be changes to questions. Questions might be added or deleted, taken out of the return based on the comments. Then there will be new XML codes for any questions that were added. The ones removed, again, when we publish the updated Omni CBR in December, we will show in the comments matrix what did we add, what did we take away, why, what was the thinking behind that. So the ones that remain, those are the XML codes that you will be using. So building can already start now, and that's why we wanted to give the XML codes. The ones that will remain will not change. It's just if we add, then it will add. If you're submitting it as a web-based submission, what we're going to do is allow you to, and that's why the first submission is very important, the first and the second, to double check that you actually customize it correctly, because the way that you'll customize it, your return will appear that way the next time as well, and then you'll start completing it just to make it a little bit easier for you to do. But yes, there is going to be some labor intensivity here. We do realize that there is going to be system development, and that's why we're staggering it over a few years. Again, on this return, just to touch on what Charene said, because I really want to touch on it, in the company information sheet, and I see my colleagues try to also touch on it in the answers, really just go with what customers do you have? If you're a CIS, you'll need to do portfolios, and then what industry you are, and customize from there. We know that you can't complete anything in the cells because of the XML codes being there and it being locked. We know that you can't, that the formats of the cells aren't always right, like on the company information sheet that's not locked. We also know that some of the questions that you're going to answer on the governance sheet especially, but there are other places, will be yes and no answers. So it won't necessarily be a number answer, but there's no fields that are there for you to give descriptions and explanations and all those longer type of answers. We had that question yesterday about the fit and proper and all of those type of answers that we're doing, and that might be in the annual return many, many years from now, and then you'll upload documents for that. Your declaration, just to sign off to say this is an accurate and complete return, and again, in the phasing period, it will be a best effort. That is what we'll expect you to upload here. I know you have a sequence, Charene, so I don't want to interfere with your sequence. I hope that answered about how we're going to submit, how it works, that we are cognizant of the fact that there was different data maturity is the word that I'm looking for, data maturity in the different sectors. Yes, we have to look at smaller FSPs versus bigger FSPs. And if you can come up with suggestions to say, if I'm a smaller FSP, this I can do, but I might need to do it on a biannual basis for at least 3 or 4 years. Those are the type of discussions we'll have in phase 2 when we talk about implementation and the practicality around it. Here, when we talk about the questions, it's about we want you to understand why we ask what we ask, so that you can understand why we need that information, why you need that information too, and that it will lead to us being in a better position to regulate, you in a better position to run your business. Around the terminology, agreed, again, Paul, we don't want you to look up things, but we don't want to put in 300 terminologies or 600 terminologies to address everyone in the industry. We believe that if you're in the industry and you're registered, you know under which act you're registered as a professional FSP, like you said, and that you would understand some terminologies. There are some, like what we identified yesterday, that we could be explaining better when it comes to a question because it's not in legislation, and those are the type of suggestions that we really value. I think yesterday's discussion was very good around terminology and what we should be adding that would actually enhance the guideline to actually answer this return and not just make it a longer list. Charene, although you have your sequence, I just want to, there's a question about relicensing that I can take a stab at and answer, but I think Lizanne would be best, and also just to kind of explain how relicensing, when you do license under COFI, how that works out with the return. I can probably just say to you that from my point of view, the return is not going to change drastically. This is not a volatile thing. That's why we rolled it out over a few years. On the company information sheet, you have level 1, 2, and 3. 1 will say whether you're a category 1 or a category 4 FSP. Then you'll say what type of FSP you are. And I see there's already notes about the underwriting managers and the NMIs. We had the same discussion yesterday also, that there needs to be some refinement there. In the CIS workshops, we also had that discussion about refinement. And then level 3 is activities that are currently in COFI that we're 99% sure will stay there. There could be more on the final bill that goes through, and then it will be added there. You answer yes and no. For us to start getting data on it, and for you as an industry to start getting used to using that terminology and knowing your business, where does it fall in, and when you need to be licensed, where would you be licensed for it? It doesn't affect the customization of the return at the start. It's really just to get everyone accustomed to the new terminology. When COFI becomes act, these things run not dependent on each other, but concurrent. There might be changes to some headings, for instance, on the sheet, but it won't affect the information we're asking, because your market conduct, you'll still be doing the business that you're doing. You'll still have the same market conduct risks that you have now. We will still need the same indicators. And that's why the contents, headings might change, but contents won't change because it remains the same. But I don't know if Lizanne wants to address that one. I'm just worried that we get, because I know when we start going down on the chats, then we start and we have people coming in, then we don't answer everything maybe necessarily. If that happens, I mean, bear with us, we're a lot in this workshop, then just raise your hand so that we know we missed your comment. But I'm worried that Lizanne might need to leave and she can maybe explain that even better than I can.
Thank you, Juanita. So it's Lizanne and then Jackie.
Okay, thanks, Charene. I'm going to keep it brief. So under the COFI bill, there's the transitional period. There's not going to be a relicensing process in terms of which you will have to reapply if you are already licensed. You will see that there are transitional provisions in the COFI bill that says that if you're licensed, you will keep your status. It will just be a question of moving to the activity-based licensing. So it's not a question of your license falls away, you have to reapply. We are working internally on the entire licensing framework under COFI, but please bear in mind the COFI bill still needs to go through the parliamentary process, which might also be, I mean, there's going to be a lot of consultation on that in advance. So The communication regarding how the licensing process will work will be dealt with in a separate stream to the reporting. Remember, reporting is already a requirement in terms of your existing license. So the licensing process and how that will be dealt with will be communicated, and we will consult on that in due course. But don't have any concerns that you're going to have to all reapply for licenses under COFI. If you're already licensed, that's not the case, and we will be communicating the process in due course. I think let's focus on there's a lot of questions, Charene, so I'm going to hand back to you. Let's focus on the questions and dealing with the reporting and the questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lizanne. Jackie, you've been incredibly patient. Do you want to go ahead?
Thanks, Charene, and good morning. Just to mention that if there are any micro insurers that are in the workshop, they are also welcome to participate. I just need to mention that when the first workshop was conducted with the industry, with the insurance sector, we noted that some micro insurers might not have received the invitation to the workshop. So we extended this particular workshop to all licensed micro insurers. So this is what I just wanted to mention, that they are all welcome to participate, and we're really looking forward to the engagement going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, and I can't agree with you more. And one of the points that I think we need to make is that we value every single person and entity in the industry. So whether you are the classical sole proprietor running just on your own, you have no employees, or whether you are representing a very large employer or industry association, we value each and every comment. And when we are analyzing the comments, because that was also a question that was asked yesterday, are we going to discard a comment if it comes from one entity, or are we going to recognize that a comment may actually be representing a very large part of the industry? And as we said yesterday, and I just want to reiterate that today, every single comment is valuable, and we are going to be giving attention to every comment. So there's a lot of comments about content, and we will do our best to deal with that today. And if we can't deal with that today, then we will make sure that we include that in the comments and the feedback afterwards. Ian, you've also been waiting for a while to speak. Your microphone is enabled from our side. So please go ahead, unmute, and make your comment or ask your question.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you, Paul. I'm back where Paul was speaking. But about the report, and then the other thing about the report, why don't you make it more user-friendly for us? You don't have to make it with all this Excel stuff. Make it web-based, that we can make it, use it as user-friendly. We are your clients, and we are paying to be your clients. So make it user-friendly for us, please. Thank you.
So, Ian, thank you very much for that. And maybe this didn't come out clearly. So let me just explain that. And Juanita is much better than I am at this, so she's also going to help. But we are catering for two ways in which to respond to us. The one is for the XML functionality. And there were quite a few questions about where the XML codes are. So most of the XML codes have been built into the spreadsheet itself, but the functionality of responding is still in the final stages of completion. The other way, Ian, and this is, I think, specifically to your point and to customers such as yourself who don't want to go the XML route, we are going to use our e-portal functionality on our website, and we are going to have a website-enabled completion process. And that is going to enable you to access the e-portal and to start completing it. We are also going to build it in such a way that you don't have to complete all of the questions at the same stage. So if you want to take a specific section of the questions and complete that today and then save it and then come back to it tomorrow and complete the next section, or even if you are, and I've also seen some questions around that, more than one person from a specific entity who collaborates to complete this, you would be able to do that as well. And there are going to be specific allowances and approvals for people, so not anyone can just go and answer on behalf of an entity. So we will also have some protections built in so that you know that the responses that are submitted on your behalf are the valid and authentic responses and the ones that you've actually authorized to be submitted on your behalf. And again, this talks to businesses with more than one person. But we are going to be catering for that. We are going to be testing the functionality next year. So we've mentioned the pilot phase. So this year, we just unpack the 4-year implementation phase. So this year is for you to get a sense of what are the proposed questions and then comment about the applicability of the question, the understandability of the questions, and if you can think of different ways to ask the question that would make it more user-friendly, you're most welcome to do that, and we really look forward to those questions. Next year is going to be our pilot phase, and there we are going to be testing the questions as well as the functionality of the reporting itself. And if you are interested in participating in the pilot phase, then you can send an email to myself or to Juanita or to both of us, and we have started compiling a volunteer list. And then we will gladly include you in the volunteer list, and we will engage with you towards the end of the year so that we can set up the pilot participation that will run over next year. The implementation phase, and it's going to be a phased-in implementation, will start in year 3, which is 2024. And I must always do the maths in my head that we're in 2022 right now. So we are only going to start with broader implementation from 2024 onwards. Juanita, do you want to add anything at this stage?
No, Charene, I think you answered it quite well. I see Ian did also ask in the comments about when the return needs to be finished. I'm not sure if that finish means finished in submitting, because that would be, like we said, when we're done with the phasing period and done with the rollout that you explained now, then we want to move to a quarterly basis for the return. This is across the industry. And then you'll be submitting it within a month after the end of the quarter. And we work on calendar quarters so we can get it in at the same time, do the analysis at the same time, do the peer groupings, the benchmarking, and then give you feedback before you have to submit again. In terms of duplication, I just want to touch on that question. This is not duplication because yes, you have to get, this is actually assisting if you're already getting the information for insurers, because I see it's about the duplication of complaints and you're already giving it to the insurers. Yes, but do you know that certain areas, especially the complaints area, is the one that we struggle with the most to get accurate data from an insurer, because all of their partners are not giving them all the information because they're not working on getting all the information. So if you're already doing that, then that is fantastic, because that is what we expect from the insurers. But the insurers will be giving it to us, or actually they're currently giving it to us at a high level and its totals, and they'll also complete this complaints spreadsheet, but for all their complaints, which would include your complaints. You are completing the spreadsheet for your business. So there will be different benchmarking done and different peer groupings done and different analysis done on what you as a FSP do and in your business, and where are you in your industry versus where the insurer with all their complaints getting from everywhere is, and whether they're outliers or not, and whether we need to engage with them or not. And that is the type of tracking that we then need to see. So there is no duplication of effort.
Thank you very much, Juanita. Paul, I see you have your hand up again, but I'm just going to give Akashan a chance to just explain the macros. We've also figured out that it was the load shedding and the switch over on the data that created the problem that we experienced a little bit earlier. So unfortunately, we are also not exempt from that. But Akashan's just going to go very slowly through the macros, and you would have seen that we've posted the whole process in the chat function as well. Akashan, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Charene. Okay, so I will share my screen again with everybody, and I will go from the start. So we will go to our website. Okay, so again, regulatory framework, and then industry consultation and general. So under general, you will find FSCA communication. You will click on the plus sign and you'll find the first zip folder on the top. If you click on that, the zip folder will download at the bottom. Again, if you click on that, it'll open up the folder for you with the 3 documents inside. So the Excel spreadsheet is Annexure A. Okay, so when the spreadsheet opens up, this will be the first page. We'll click on Enable Editing. Yeah, and then now you can start customizing the sheet. So when you go to company information, here if you select your, make your selections here, and if you select financial advisor, the spreadsheet was supposed to open up further down after line 26, but it doesn't do that. So in order for that to happen, you will click on File, you'll go to Options, you'll go to Trust Center, and then Trust Center Settings. Okay, when you're there, you will select your macro settings. Then you got your macro settings on the side here. You will select the last one that says Enable VBA Macros. And then you will select also Trust Access to the VBA project. And you'll select OK, and then you select OK again. Then you need to save the spreadsheet. So save the spreadsheet on your desktop, or if you want to make a folder, you're welcome to do that and save it in that folder. When you save the spreadsheet, save it as Excel macro enabled workbook. Okay, so I'm going to save it on the desktop. Okay, and then save it. Once it saves, you close the document. Okay, you go to your desktop, you'll find the document on your desktop with a little exclamation mark next to it. If you click on it, it opens up the new spreadsheet for you. And then if you go to your company information and if you select financial advisor again, the rest of the workbook opens up for you. Okay. Thanks, Charene.
Thank you very much, Akashan. I see there are questions about the difference between the Omni CBR for FSPs based on the size of the FSPs. We literally just had 2 workshops because we wanted smaller FSPs and larger FSPs to be able to join and ask their questions comfortably. We've had comments in the past that smaller FSPs might feel intimidated if they are in the same audience as larger FSPs. And that was really the only reason for the 2 workshops and the differentiation in the invitations. The content of the Omni CBR and therefore the questions that you may ask are exactly the same. We just wanted to create an environment in which FSPs don't feel intimidated to ask their questions. And what we have said before, and I see some of my colleagues have made the comments as well, please understand that from our side as the regulator, we do not differentiate in the value that we place on an entity based on the size of the business of that entity. Whether you are a sole proprietor or whether you are a large organization, your voice is valued and you are important to us. We really do not differentiate in terms of the value that we have. And the questions that we ask you are the same. Obviously, you would not answer some of the questions on Book of Business if that doesn't apply to you. But that's going to be the level of differentiation. The level of differentiation is not, I don't answer this because I'm a small FSP. There was also a question from a funeral parlor earlier on where it said that they tried the differentiation on the sheet. And I think that's on level 2 and level 3 on the company information sheet, and that you didn't see different questions because you're a funeral parlor. Now, you're right. There aren't different questions for funeral parlors. It's the same questions as for the other FSPs. The level of differentiation is also so that we, as the regulator, get a better sense of what activities do the regulated entities engage in. So if you are primarily a funeral parlor? Are you primarily one that provides advice? Do you also provide additional funeral services? Because there are also differences in what people do. Some only provide advice and policies, and others do provide the full funeral service as well. We know that there are different ways in which the industry operates, and it helps us to get a sense of how far are the other services that you provide, or whether you provide a limited range of services. And this is the true, regardless of whether you're a funeral parlor or a motor dealer or a credit provider. You'll see at level 2, we ask for different information, and then we differentiate further on level 3, and the level 3 differentiators are built on the COFI activities, the proposed COFI bill activities. Juanita, I see you are ready to ask a question or to respond to one of the questions.
Thanks, Charene. Yes, so I think, I can't remember if it's Ian or Paul that mentioned that we have to be more customer focused and try to make this easier for you. So one of the things we can do is we can also do a very short webinar where we have Akash explaining this step by step, and we put that on our YouTube channel. I mean, Charene is the best in organizing all of these webinars and putting it on the YouTube channel. So if the instructions are not going to work and you want to see it step by step, then that is something that we can do. It is a shorter webinar, and it can assist. I think that might even be better than putting instructions, because we can start then from where can you find it on our website and then work it through from there. But also remember, we put the links into the roadmap document, so that you can actually just click there and then go to the webinars, and we put the links there for going to the other documents on the website to try and make it easier. That's the one thing I wanted to say. The other thing, John, is when I refer to a one-man show, I didn't mean that in any disrespectful way. I actually tried to show or talk about small entities, and we don't want to use sole proprietor as the reference to that, because we know there can be huge sole proprietors with very huge businesses. I also don't want to say a professional one man professional, because it can be a woman as well. So let's just talk about a small FSP then. And the one thing that I'm seeing in the comments that I'm not understanding, and when I say small FSP, then I mean the person that is the one person running the FSP. So the one that wouldn't need a compliance officer. And there is a question about the compliance officers that I'll leave Charene to answer. That's her expert field. But the one question and remarks and things that I see coming up is that we don't see our clients that much. We're not going to be able to see them this much to complete it. What about the ones that's far off and in the smaller areas? But you don't have to see your clients to be able to complete the return. The only new information that's going to be on the return is about the new policies that you sold or the new services that you're offering. And you should have the details about your new clients when you onboard them. So if you've onboarded them in that quarter, then that would affect the value of your book in total, and you would want to know that. You would want to know if there's growth. And then we ask specific questions about the gender and the age of the new policies as well, which is the only new information that you would have. The rest is really in such a way that it's on your current book. You don't need to engage with any customers to be able to update that. And then if you actually have other agreements that you entered into or changed in terms of fees or charges in that quarter, that is also the changes that you will be reporting on. So it doesn't put an obligation on you to see your customers more often. And like I said, you don't need to see them to be able to complete this return. This is almost like a financial statement in a different format, because some prudential indicators are also market conduct indicators. You can't really remove them from each other, but we're asking it at a different level. That's why there's no duplication, even if you give in your financial statements, because we're asking it at the level of your customer. And if you actually think of all the requirements that you had in terms of phase and in terms of FIC, and knowing who your customer is, and knowing that the advice and the service that you're giving is appropriate, and you yourself wanting to know if your business is growing or not growing, those are the questions that we're asking you in here. So I think I'm not really understanding why there's so many comments about the interaction that you'll need with your customers to be able to complete the return.
Thank you, Juanita. And just on your comment about the webinar, I have confirmed with Akashan that he is willing to do a webinar, and we will be recording such a webinar and host it as early as possible in next week. But please don't tell us that it's not up on Sunday. Today is Friday. We're not going to have it up on Sunday, but we will aim for early next week. Okay. Just don't hold us to a specific date, but it will be up in next week. We will also send the instructions just via email to all of the FSPs, so that FSPs who don't get a chance to watch the webinar also have the written instructions. So thank you for pointing out that we need to slow down. We will definitely be making the instructions on accessing the Omni CBR and enabling the macros, if you have that problem, available to everyone. Then Ian, I see your hand is up. I'm not sure whether it is still up as a result of earlier or whether you have a new comment. And then we have Paul as well.
No, sorry, that must have been up since the beginning when I put it up. I don't know why it's not still on there.
Okay, Charene, there are two ways of submitting the Omni CBR. The one is the XML one with all those wonderful XML codes, and that's likely to be used by very large corporates who have the capacity to create the systems that will generate that for them from their own systems. The vast majority of the smaller FSPs are going to be utilizing the online web-based system. My question for you on that is, will you be making the information that is submitted by those FSPs available to them in an easy way once they have submitted it? And the reason I ask that is that if you look at your e-services portal, and in fact, in the past, when we had to submit compliance reports, once you'd submitted the compliance report, you could not get back from the system copies of the annexures that you'd submitted. So you could get a copy of the way the compliance report was completed with the yeses and nos and not applicable, but there wasn't anything that would give you a way of pulling back from the authority the records that you submitted. So I'm hoping that in this Omni CBR, what you will have is a way that I, as an FSP, can interrogate my responses, or you will provide to me some mini business information, management information type systems that I could then utilize your capacity to understand the reports that I have given over the last 2-3 years or whatever quarters. I'm just leaving that as something that I think you need to consider. But we had a lot of issues on that kind of thing and how to complete. I just want to take us to a question on the spreadsheet itself, on the business composition, the all business composition, retail and product performance. You have a question there. State the number of instructions received by the entity in the first 3 months after inception of the product or joining the fund as per the breakdown. So you're looking for cancellations and lapses and such like. We're looking at a quarterly response. So my query is, if I am doing the report for the first quarter of 2023, would I then be looking at those cases that came in that month, or would I have to have the system to say that, no, hang on, I had a case that I issued in the last quarter of 2022, and within 3 months of it being issued, the client has requested a cancellation or lapse. So are we looking at only the stuff that's within the quarter, or am I having to look at previous quarters and stuff? And again, when you get down to the later questions, there are things around within the first 4 to 12 months. So I'm actually having to have systems, as I understand that. So in a case that I sold in the first quarter of 2022, that if it was lapsed in the first quarter of 2023, that I'd have to report on that as an instruction. So I think you need to clarify that in terms of how one is to go about measuring those things. And I understand where you're coming from, but it's around having the correct cohorts of business and actually having systems that actually record it that way.
Thank you, Paul. I see Juanita is ready to answer.
Thanks, Paul. I always appreciate the comments that you make. So it is the instruction after the inception of the product as stated in the question, which then would mean that, yes, you could have sold the product in the last month of quarter one. The instruction for cancellation came in quarter two, but it's within that 3 months. So it was in the next month, the first month of quarter two, and that's when the cancellation came through. You'll report the cancellation in that quarter because the reporting period refers to the quarter. But you'll have to be able to know how old your policy is to be able to know, would it fall within the first 3 months or is it in 4 to 12 months? The reason why we did this split, and I know that you know the reason, I'm cognizant of the fact that you mentioned that, but maybe for the rest of the audience, why we have that breakdown is because there's different market conduct indicators here that we need to look at from our side and from your side. So if it's within the first 3 months, it could be an indicator of possible mis-selling. It could be that the product is maybe not appropriate for that target market, especially if you get a lot of cancellations in that first 3 months. Then they're not happy with something, and you also need to address that then with the product provider, and the product provider needs to know it to see if there's an answer. And we have seen that. We've seen products being launched. We've seen a lot of cancellations in that first 3 months. We accept it's maybe a mis-selling issue, but then you as FSP know that you didn't do any mis-selling, but then it is because the product isn't performing the way that it should. It was launched and everything wasn't in place for it, and people are already unhappy about it, and they cancel within the first 3 months. So that is why we're doing the first 3 months, although mis-selling is a strong indicator also in the first 3 months. 4 to 12 months usually show us that people took the policy, but now, given the circumstances, it could be affordability. It's not that they didn't want the policy, so it's not mis-selling usually in that period. And this is what we've tracked in the industries across. It could be that they need to actually take that investment out again, and then there's a lot of costs involved to it. So it also informs how do we need to approach that. If we see a trend like that, because it's obviously not just insurance policies, it's disinvestments. If there's a trend like that, did they get the right advice? From your side, you'll say, yes, we did give the right advice, but, you know, with COVID, people invested, and then COVID happened, and people, COVID happened, and people needed to take out their investments again because they lost their employment. And then we also have that type of information. On the other hand, we've also had products where people believed it will react like a banking product, and when they realized it didn't, they then disinvested. And that is a lot of costs that is involved, especially in that first year. And that is why we need to have that differentiation between the first 3 months and then after the first 3 months, but still within the first year. And yes, it will be that you would need to know the age of your policies. Any intermediary selling life policies already know exactly how old their policies are because the commission is linked to that. But also the guys on the investment side also know this because there's charges and things involved. So for some, there will be more system development than for others to be able to answer this. And on that point, one of the things that Charene touched on is if it's not applicable to you, and it was with the funeral parlor question especially, and we have to look at proportionality, you put in a 0 at this stage or a non-applicable if it's a yes or no question. what I touched on earlier in the session is that we didn't want to make any assumptions right now and gray out areas that wouldn't be applicable to you. And then in fact, when you have to answer it, and we saw this out of experience with the insurance CBRs, we expect that a certain product wouldn't have certain features and certain questions wouldn't be applicable to them. But we didn't gray it out. And then we started getting answers and we learned something new about what's going on with certain insurers in the industry and certain products having certain features which wouldn't be characteristic to that type of product or that type of service. That's why we're not making assumptions in this first round, and we're leaving it open for you to answer and putting in a 0. When we start seeing that things are performing the way that it should and as expectations, and this is not an assumption on our side, then we can work on even further trying to make this a customer-friendly type of return, graying out areas that won't be applicable to certain industries, or questions that won't be applicable to you, and it will then also make the return smaller for you and more focused to make it a little bit more user-friendly. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. And just on the point of making your information available back to you once you've responded to us. In the past with compliance reports, we did not make the annexures available because the assumption was that that was your information that you'd provided to us. So you would have the records, but where FSPs lost the records, we did make it available to them on request. But this is certainly something that we will test with the pilot phase next year as to what kind of access would you need back to the information that you've uploaded to us, whether you give it to us in an XML format or using the web. So that's certainly something in terms of functionality that we can test. I see that Ian and John has their hands up. So what I'm going to do from a process perspective is to give both Ian and John a chance to respond and ask their questions. And then we're going to, okay, I see Ian has just dropped his hand. So John, we're going to give you a chance to raise your question or comment. And then after we've responded to John, we're going to take a break. Just for those of you who've been wondering, when are we going to stop and just give you a chance to get a refill on your coffee? John, please do go ahead. John, just click on the mic at the top of your screen and it should then not be crossed out anymore. John, I'm unable to get any sound from you. Are you using a desktop by any chance? Because we have had in other workshops where guests who've joined us using desktops were unable to get the sound activated. I don't know if you have a microphone enabled ear headpiece perhaps that you could use. Okay, so my clock says it's 11:41, so let's take a 10-minute break. And if we could start again at 11:50, so that gives everyone a chance to just stretch their legs, grab a cup of coffee, and we'll be back at 11:50, everyone. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope you had a chance to grab some coffee or water, stretch your legs, and that you're energized and ready to go back. So I am going to try. John, would you like to try and raise your hand again? I see that you said that your laptop indicators were that the presenter must unmute you. So let's try this again. So Akashan has given you microphone access from our side. So what you now need to do is just click at the top of the screen next to the camera function. There's a microphone function on your screen. If you can click on that, you should be able to, so it's a two-step unmuting. We give you access and then you must unmute yourself. So Caution, maybe share your screen from your side and just show John where to unmute, and then maybe we can help to just get him enabled to speak. So John, you can see where Akashan's just got his cursor. So if you can just click where he is clicking on your screen right at the top, then that should, unfortunately, we can't unmute that for you. We can only give you microphone access from our side. John, there might be a glitch on your side. Please type your comments and we will do our level best to make sure that all of your comments are addressed. I'm going to try and, sorry about that, just see if there are any comments. Okay, there's a comment from Chadbourne Private Wealth, a general overall question and direction to help us develop an operational data platform. Could we consider or encourage the industry to form, open data for finance association? This can allow quicker development of standardized formats and with a healthy move towards APIs, more efficient data transfer to also limit the issues noted in this webinar. And that you understand there is an FSCA workflow for open finance, but it would be healthy and efficient to be industry-led, where the FSCA is a collaborator. I don't know, Juanita, do you have any comments about such a suggestion? I think that we would be open to any collaboration from industry that enables you to function better and more efficiently.
Yeah, Charene. So currently what we're asking here, we're not getting through any of the other channels in terms of the work done by the guys, because this is actually the fintech guys dealing with the open financial markets and sharing of the information and all of that that's being referred to. They might actually need the information from us, although everyone is in the FSCA, but it's not the same level of information that's being asked for that we're doing here.
Thank you, Juanita. Gerald, I see you have a question. How does one report on the male/female or age stat for a short-term product sold to a family with a husband, wife, and 2 of the 3 kids all driving insured vehicles, and reporting that the policyholder is male or female does not capture the true data? This is interesting. We had a very similar question yesterday as well. So at this stage, our best answer is that you would look at the main policyholder, because normally where there are multiple people insured on the same policy, from an insurance perspective, one of those people are regarded as the main policyholder. So our best response at this stage is that you would then use the main policyholders information to respond on that question. However, this is something that you can comment on in the comment page on the website. Remember, comments are open and available until the 10th of August. And if you have suggestions as to how we can do this, given the data constraints that you might be facing, please do so, and we will consider all possible ways in which we can get that information. Then, thank you very much, John, for pinning myself and Juanita. We have started a pilot volunteer spreadsheet on our side. We are adding information as we receive the emails. We'll also check the chat functions, but if you send us an email, then we have all of your contact details, and that will just give us more ways in which to get hold of you. And we would be very interested in everyone who wants to participate. Okay, then Alan has a question on the company information tab. All subcategories in column 2 have a further subdivision, payment services, in column 3. Is it intended that this will apply to entities that are responsible for collecting or accounting for premiums payable? Yes, that would be definitely one of the responses, please, Alan. And if this is Alan Holton, then I think it is. Welcome, Alan. Nice to have you as part of our group. Alan continues to say, you asked this in light of the various RDR indications that premium collection will ideally be defined as an outsourced activity, currently not a regulated activity. There is a definition of payment services in COFI, but it does not cover all premium collection activities. And so that is one of the things that we are working on. So at this stage, it is the broad definition of payment services. And if things change in the future, then we will amend where necessary. Paul, you are asking where are the questions for the CBR. I wonder if you are one of the people who might have to enable the macros. If you scroll up in the chat function, you will see that we've given the instructions for enabling the macro function on the worksheet. And that should solve the problem. We are also going to be sending instructions out to all the FSPs. We'll send out written instructions in the course of next week to just give people a step-by-step guide as to how to enable the macro functions. And we will also record a webinar on just explaining that. Then Glenn, you say you would prefer not to report on gender. You think it infringes on your client's rights. Could I ask you to make some comments on that in the formal comment and exactly how you think it infringes on your client rights so that we can consider that carefully from a legal perspective? And then Sue is asking, is there a field to enter independent compilers information? Many FSPs do not use an auditor. Sue, I can't remember all the questions. If we haven't made provision for that, could you please make a comment for us on that so that we can just include that in the questions? And that's a very valid observation that you've made. Anne-Marie, you're asking what benefits are there for participating in the pilot program. So for me, the major benefit of participating in the pilot program is that you would have a year of testing with us on a regular basis to see what do you need so that you are ready to answer the questions. And you would also be able to start interrogating the data that you use to respond to the questions and see what management information for your business do you get out of this? Because in our view, you are going to get quite a lot of information that you could use to manage your business even more efficiently. One of the things that we've seen in the past is that when we ask businesses, where does most of your business lie? They have a good sense intuitively because of understanding their businesses and who they focus on. But when they start unpacking the data, they sometimes get unexpected Easter eggs in their data. And it says to them that you have a pocket that you haven't explored fully, but can actually give quite a lot of benefit and additional value to your business. And we're hoping that you are going to be able to get that Easter egg surprises from your management information as well. But for me, as I said, the main benefit is that you're going to be working with us very closely to get your business ready to respond to the data, and you can set up your data systems internally so that you are ready and able to respond, and that when we start the implementation, this is not a new process for you, but it's something that you've been working on for at least a year at that stage. Then Glenn, sorry, I'm not sure if this is a comment or a question. Short-term policies where I should list gender as male for a family. That's where I said, if you will look at the, I'm sorry, I just have a cough. Sorry, just on that. Short-term policies where you should list gender as male for a family. It would depend on who is regarded as the main policy holder for that family policy, who you will revert to. In some instances, it is the spouse. that is listed, one of the spouses is normally listed as the main policyholder. So you would look at the main spouse for that policy purposes, not main spouse from another perspective, but from a policy perspective, who is regarded as the main policyholder. Juanita, do you want to just expand on that?
I actually think you answered it quite well, Charene. I wanted to earlier, so yes, with short-term policies, it would be the main policyholder. You'll have, even in life with the joint policyholders, like you said, we follow the main policyholders, gender and age, except if you can give it in detail in both on the life side, which I'm not sure that everyone can do at this stage. We expect the insurers to be able to do that, and they would break it down in more detail for us. So your return is a lighter return, and our expectations of you are lighter than that of what we are expecting from institutions like the insurer. I actually wanted to address the question by Sue about the independent compliers that would be submitting the return. We don't expect an auditor to submit the return. There was also a question about whether you have to appoint a compliance officer now or not. Whether a compliance officer is needed or not is a FSP licensing question about whether you have representatives or not, or whether it's just this one person in the business. So the return does not affect that. We are not asking for audited statements here. And therefore, when you do submit the return, you actually have to, on the website, say who you are, from which organization, and we would need to know that that organization already approved you as a website user, which would have been done if you've submitted anything for that organization in any one of the sectors. Then we would have you on our database as an approved user. If you're not an approved user, we'll need the CEO of that entity to confirm that you can submit returns on behalf of that entity, that you are authorized, and then we will approve you as an approved user on the portal, and you will be able to submit, and we have an audit trail to show who submitted what, when, for who. So that is how we will see who submitted, but it doesn't have to be an auditor. The only question we have on the auditors is we do ask if we do have an external auditor. That would be for the bigger FSPs, that you actually submit that information for us and whether the auditor was changed in the reporting period or not. Then to Sam's remark that I also saw a lot of responses on, that quarterly might be too much for you in this return. So we actually did have discussions about that, a lot of discussions internally in our workshops and looking at that. And the indicators that we put in this return versus the indicators we wanted to put in this return, we really narrowed that down to indicators that are volatile enough that they change on a quarterly basis. And if we wanted to be proactive as a regulator, and even you proactive in your business, these are the indicators we would need on a quarterly basis. We understand that it is going to take more effort to complete it. But we also understand that we've taken away some of your reporting, even as an FSP in other sectors, so that you have the opportunity to streamline your reporting here for us. So it would be this report and your financial statements, and the two would very much speak to each other on some of the questions. It's just on a different level that you need to answer. If we take it away and we make it over a longer period, even if we make it biannual, it might then be too late to intervene for us or you, and we need to protect customers. And that is our main task. And in terms of trying to get the information, John, I saw your remark about trying to get it from a CISO also and SAIA. They don't have the information to this level and detail that we need. And this is not a spreadsheet. I understand you've been in business for many years and you know your business, but this is our business. We need to supervise from a market conduct regulator perspective. We need to be sure that we protect all the customers that do not know their business. And in the same breath, again, when you start completing the return and submitting it, you will see how many things you find out from your own business that you didn't even realize. And I do not believe that any entity in this room today would only look at their income statement or at their balance sheet or at any bank statement, if it's just a bank statement, to see if there was growth in your business or not, and whether you sold new products and services or not, once in 6 months. You would want to know that on a monthly basis, and we're asking it on a quarterly basis. And in terms of the other questions, again, we are going to have the import functionality. So on the web-based submission, you'll do your customization once. It will draw some of the information that wouldn't be that volatile to complete, and you can check the accuracy thereof and only complete the ones that are volatile. So that would have changed, like the numbers in terms of what is your revenue, what is your policies, and the breakdown of it. But other things that might not have changed, like the additional services that you've given. And if some things on your governance didn't change, then that would remain the same. But you would also need to know that you complied. And this is a catch. This is a net catching you to make sure that you are compliant, because in your busy day, going through everything that you need to do, and a lot of us do come from the financial advisor sector, and we understand how much you need to do and how much admin is involved. And we also understand how much other product providers are currently doing to try and streamline that process for you and try and getting you on their system and trying to work on their systems. And that is anyway going to be a criteria for a lot of them going forward, because they want streamlined processes and they want assurance in the data that they have to also run their businesses. It will have the same benefit to your business. And that is why we would need that information on a quarterly basis. I think I kind of interrupted myself then, didn't get to the point that I wanted to make also. But yes, we are going to try and make it as customer friendly as we possibly can, with good suggestions given. And yes, we know you know your business, but we know our business, and we're trying to help you learn more about your business and how to actually see market conduct risks, which is something you've never reported on before, sooner, because we have seen in the entities that struggle, there's a lot of, and even the ones where we had to suspend licenses, it's because of compliance requirements that were not made because you're so busy you forgot to tell us about a change. That's what I was trying to say when I interrupted myself. And you didn't notify us of changes because you were so busy with your day-to-day job. This is going to assist us in getting that extra comfort that you are notifying us, that you are being compliant, that we do have the correct data. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. Paul and Phil, before we give you a chance to respond, I just want to pick up on some of the questions. So there was a repeat question about the difference between yesterday's workshop and today's workshop. So it's the same issues. We don't have separate sheets for smaller FSPs and larger FSPs. We really just wanted to split the workshop so that people feel that they have a voice and that their voice will be heard. That was the only reason for the difference in the workshops. We have given you the email addresses for myself and Juanita in the chats as well, for those of you who do want to participate in the pilot. Then, Dawn, you say you are an adler and you're talking about the frequency of products and the fact that your products and even your proposed information in the future, or your products in the future, will also be monthly products, not necessarily longer products, if I understand the gist of your question. Please do look at the questions again. And then when you make your formal comments, explain to us what the challenges are that you will be facing. And you might be a very good person or a business to volunteer for participation in the pilot program, because in the pilot program, we're going to be testing both the questions as well as the reporting format. And that could then give us a very good sense with your participation about what are the challenges that we haven't foreseen and that we need to cater for. Then there was a question about the applicability to UMAs. Yes, the Omni CBR is applicable to UMAs as well. Christian, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You're asking about a conversation between insurers, UMAs, and brokers about barn-owl data. I don't know that specific data section, but you're most welcome to have those conversations. And if you want to include us to help you think about some issues, do let us know. And where possible, we will gladly participate. Thanks, Dawn. If you can then just send me an email with all of your contact details. Perfect. And then I'm going to go to, I think it's Paul first and then Phil. Thank you.
Thanks, Charene. And for Juanita, I just want to query the complaints handling sheet. The question 1.1 says, state the total number of all complaints at the end of the reporting period. So we're looking at the number of complaints that were received in that reporting period, or the entire list of complaints? So if I've got a complaints register that goes back 5 years and I've had 10,000 complaints, did I tell you 10,000? And I can't see, I think what you're trying to get out of here is that you would want to know the number of complaints at the beginning of the reporting period, and then how many complaints were received during that quarter and how they were responded to in terms of how many are outstanding, how many were found in favor of the client and so forth, and then how many still remain at the end. So you're getting a rolling total. But can you please confirm the actual requirement here, please?
Thanks, Paul.
Sorry, Charene. Get so excited when I know an answer. So, yes, Paul, you're actually quite right. We don't want to know forever. We should actually, I think if we look at that question, make it as state the total number of all open complaints, because it's the questions underneath that then go about the questions, the number of complaints that you received in that quarter. And you're right, we're working it down. What did you receive? What was decided? Where did you get your terminations? Where's the channels from? And then we end up with the outstandings. And how long it takes you, how long have they been outstanding? What is your turnaround time? And we differentiate for the different people in the target market, which we obviously then do to make sure that you have an efficient complaints handling system. And that you treat all your customers the same. That's why we want the differentiation there, that you don't deal with some better than others, depending on the size of your customer or how long your customer has been with you, in terms of if it's someone much older with a lot of products and they've been with you long, that you deal with their complaints faster. But that's exactly what we're trying to see, is how do you deal with it, also that you don't just deal with complaints with compensation payments, which I think is less of a risk in your specific industry versus others. But we can maybe, if we put in the word open, and then we might have to put in a description to say that open would mean that it hasn't been finalized and there's no decision made on it, or even if a decision was made, it's not finalized. Look at something like that to make it clearer. That is a good suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks, Juanita.
Thank you,
Juanita. That does make it a lot clearer.
Complaints, I see there was a question coming in now about the definition of complaints, and I see that we've defined complainant and not complaints. I think we were working on the assumption that people understand what a complaint is in their environment. But again, if that is a concern that you think that we might have different perspectives on that, that is something that you can raise in the comments. Juanita?
Yeah, thanks, Charene. Sorry, I think Paul was still speaking and then you started. I think there's a delay in the transit all the time. I don't know. To that point, that was actually raised by other people in other workshops as well. So we'll have to look at that. We didn't think it was necessary, like Charene said, but it is something that we'll be looking at. Paul, was there something else, a follow-up that you wanted to say to your question?
Yeah, no, I agree with him. I would also like a definition of complaints, because I've had a few various answers from insurers. But
sorry, everyone, our load shedding just ended, so there might be a small lag.
Sorry, can you hear me? Hello?
So I think we're back online again. Sorry, our load shedding ended, and then there is a small lag in timing. So Paul, you were just being queried as to whether you still had something that you wanted to ask. So if you do, please just raise your hand. But Phil Gallagher, you should be able to go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me? I have unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I agree. I would like a definition of that complaints, because various insurers explain it differently when you ask them, what do you regard as a complaint, which is now worthy of reporting. And bearing in mind, we also have a section on our administration scheme where there is room for complaints, where we're reporting direct to the insurer. So are we now going to be reporting these to the insurer and to FSCA? On this quarterly return?
Yes, so you are, and that refers to the discussion that I had a little bit earlier It's not duplication because you have to give the numbers to them anyway. You have been doing so. We might then actually, if we do these definitions and add complaint, because we only have complainant there, bring in some more clarity on how that reporting has been happening, which is another great bonus for us. So yes, you have to get the numbers ready for them in any event, but you'll have to report it on your return, because in their return, it aggregates to a total, including various FSPs and the complaints they get directly themselves, and how they deal with the complaints and the efficiency of their system, versus what we want to see here is your business and your business next to your peers and how efficient you are in dealing with your own complaints.
Okay, and then the initial question.
Thank you very much, Juanita. Christiane, if you don't mind just holding a second, we're just going to give Paul a chance to finalize his question, and then we'll give you a chance to raise your questions.
Sorry,
Charene, I think Phil was too busy.
I actually had another question. That my initial question, please, when we did the compliance reports, years ago every year, but now the insurance companies, when you've got a mandate, they're asking us to do a lot of reporting to them on various issues. Now, when I said to them that we give this information to you guys, why do they need to do it again? And they say that they have been mandated to ensure that their brokers who have mandates are complying with the rules. But now we're going to be complying with you and complying with them. Now, their exercise takes up quite a lot of time. And, when you've got one person who's handling all of this, plus we're not going to be reporting to you on a quarterly or biannual basis. Plus they're coming in once a year and saying, okay, we need to know that you're complying with this, complying with that. So at the end of the day, should we be only responsible to one or the other? I know we're responsible to both, but if we are compliant with you, they must accept that we're doing things right.
Yeah, so that's risky to say at this point, because I don't know what the insurer is checking in addition to what we're asking on the return with you, especially if you say they only come in once a year. I think that's more checking your face records and checking that you have your records of advice and those types of things that they want. I'm not sure. But in terms of what we're asking here, there would be similarities like complaints, like the information that we're asking on agreements, like binder agreements and the fees being paid. And we do ask it from both sides for a particular reason. We do want to build up a database where we actually have all the entities and see all the outsourcing and all the binder agreements that are going on in the industry, seeing who's doing which functions for who, and who is being paid which fees for which functions to which entities, so that we can also see where there's possible outliers, possible strong arming that's happening, where the function should be the same, the size of the book is the same, the policies are the same, but there is a huge difference in what is being paid for that function, and trying to understand why. Because again, the information we use here would also inform some regular changes if necessary. The information that we ask on a quarterly basis on the all sheets, we'll also ask from the insurers. So when you get it ready for them, you'll be reporting on it on your level again, and they'll be reporting it on a more aggregated level, and you'll need to get it ready for them, and the compliance thereof and the accuracy of that information would be the same. So it wouldn't be a duplicate effort. It would actually just be, you're already getting the information ready. You'll just have to submit it to us as well as to them, because we have to check your compliance and their compliance. That is true. But what they're checking on an annual basis with you, it would be difficult to say you submitting a return to us and us looking at that and only what's on the return meets all the requirements of the insurers, because I know the insurers and their ongoing monitoring, what we expect of them is to also see that your workload is intact, that what you reported to them is accurate, and that they look at things like the record of advice and those type of things, which we're not asking in the return.
Thank you, Juanita. Phil, do you still have a part of the question that you would like to discuss?
No, that's fine. That answered my question. Thank you. Did you hear me? I said, no, it's fine. That answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had a slight sound lag. Then, Paul, you can go ahead, and then we'll go to Christian.
Thanks, Charene. I just wanted to finish off that bit on complaints. So it does make sense that what you're looking for is that the question will be number of outstanding complaints or unfinalized at the start of the reporting period. And then you'd report on how many complaints you received and how they've been processed. And you would then show how many are carried forward at the end of what you're reporting. And that carried forward one would tie in with the next report as your ongoing one. So you can see effectively how many complaints one is getting and how they've been processed and whether delays and so forth. So that did answer my question on it.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. But if you think that we can phrase it better so that that is clear right from the start, please do include that in your comments.
Okay,
Christian,
will do.
Thank you very much, Paul. Then, Christian, you can go ahead.
Thank you. My question is whether we can receive more feedback regarding the consultation that you had with the industry bodies, because like with a lot of the legislation up until this point, it feels like there is consultation with the large enterprises in the industry, but the entrepreneurial companies make up a very large sector of the financial industry. And on top of that, they don't have necessarily the legal support and access to a lot of FSPs under 5 million won't even have access to an external compliance officer. So we heard in all the YouTube videos about how to complete the Omni CBR and in the roadmap that there's been consultation with the industry bodies, but as a UMA, it looks very clear that we've been left out of the picture in terms of the report not actually addressing the business model of a UMA, and I'm sure that there are administrators that feel the same way. And if we could have some of that feedback, because from our industry body, all we received was the FSCA communication, which as a large UMA, we've had that already, and no sort of feedback on what the discussion was. Because I think our role in the industry is very important in terms of being a partner for brokers. So where brokers struggle, we could assist them with compiling the data, assist them with the resources in terms of how to do it and how to approach it.
Okay, so I never know when Charene is nodding, does that mean I can go ahead, or does it mean she wants to go first? It's a very valid point that you're making, and I think maybe we didn't make it clear on the webinars, the consultation that we've done. So it wasn't formal consultation, and it wasn't just industry bodies. I mean, we have meetings with industry bodies on a biannual basis, and market conduct issues will be discussed in general, and there's a market conduct committee that you're represented on. But we didn't go to a CISA or SAHIA or the FIA and have a specific consultation process with them. That's why we're inviting everyone to, after this consultation process, if you want to meet with us individually and you want to discuss, like you're saying, this does not cater for UMAs. From our point of view, we thought that it did. We need to understand why it doesn't, and we need to understand what other options there are, and we want to make that open to anyone that wants to talk to us about it. And that's also why we mentioned earlier, we didn't have the workshops just with industry bodies. We're having this workshop with everyone. We only split the 2 webinars for the FACE guys because we just couldn't deal with all of you and all the comments in one webinar. We would sit here all day. And we're mentioning the comments that we got from yesterday that we think is not being mentioned here as well. And we're hoping that the videos would be of such a nature that we could put it on the YouTube channel. But we're trying to make sure that everyone is getting the same information. And we're trying to give everyone an opportunity to comment. That is why you don't have to comment through industry body. You can do an individual comment on our comments sheet. And that's also why, and yesterday's one, it was discussed, you know, there are some institutions that are bigger, not even just industry bodies. There are bigger institutions, and when they give a comment, they represent a certain percentage of the market versus a small entrepreneurial person that only wants to do a comment on their behalf, but they also have a lot of people that they're responsible for, or even just the person that has their own business and have a comment to give. Everyone is valid. Everyone will be looked at, everyone will be considered. And if you give a comment that we do not understand, we are going to contact you to try and understand it better, because we need insights from everyone, not just the bigger guys, the smaller guys as well. I'm very cautious of saying smaller now every time, but yes, we need of all sizes, of all entities, of all sophisticated data, of how far you are in the process, funeral parlors, insurers. We need information from everyone to know how to best make this work and roll out. It's not going to go away, but we need to make it work. And we're trying to find solutions. And I think that's also why I said to Paul earlier, I like his questions, and it was the same with Billy yesterday, because there's suggestions there. There's questions that challenge us, and that's good. We like being challenged. And suggestions on how to do it better, we love even more. So if you feel that we're not catering for UMAs here, we had that also in with the asset managers in the CIS workshop, then please engage us. You have our emails now. Let's set up a meeting. Let's work through this and understand. And if you don't want to meet with us, then you can just comment and we can deal with it that way. And I saw a note made about the comments template on the website. So it actually caters for every question in every section. So you can go into the sections that you want to comment on and that are applicable to you and where you do have a comment. And then only once you're done, then you can submit. You can have different people commenting. We know in the bigger groups, there are different people that are commenting on different areas. And there was also a question about the submitting of the returns, and I would think it's the same on the comments. Who's responsible for submitting it if there's more than one person doing it? That is not our decision. That is a decision of the entity that has to decide who is the person that's going to be responsible submitting, making sure that the comments are accurate for your entity, making sure that the return in future are accurate, but you can have more than one user, as we said. But please engage us and have a discussion with us if you think that we can improve here.
Juanita, thank you very much for that. I'm looking at the chat function right now, and there's a question about medical schemes where they are excluded. So if a medical scheme does not have another license with the FSP, with the FSCA, so for instance, they're not an FSP, then they would be excluded. But if they have another license with the FSCA, and typically medical schemes would have FSP license as well, depending on their business model, they would be responding to the Omni CBR in their capacity as an FSP, not in their capacity as a medical scheme. So I hope that I've answered that question. Anne-Marie, you had questions around complaints, and certainly we've noted that that is an issue and that we will definitely look at defining complaints. And if you have some suggestions as to the questions that we are asking and how we can refine the questions, please do make those. Portia, you asked a question about the sector information section and where would a private equity client fall in the list? Is Martha in the room? If Martha is here, could I ask her to perhaps just help us with this, because this also has relation to the investment providers. So Portia, I'm just going to see if Martha is here and able to assist with that specific question. Then, sorry, I'm trying to pick up on all the questions that we haven't addressed yet. There are some questions about juristic representatives. So the intention is not to have the juristic representatives complete the Omni CBR in their own capacity. They would provide information to the FSP on whose behalf they are acting. So the FSP would need to collate and include the juristic representative information as part of the FSP's responses, because remember, a juristic representative is not acting independently. They are an extension of the financial services provider. So the FSP must make sure that they not only get information from the natural person representatives that they employ, but they also have to get information from the juristic representatives. Then there are comments about the cost of reports and questions. Unfortunately, there is always a cost with any kind of reporting. So we are hoping that you will find that the benefits of the reporting will outweigh the initial costs that you may have to engage with. Juanita, I see you are ready to respond to some of the comments.
Thanks, Charene. I just thought I'll answer the one about the private equities. I'm not sure that Martha is here. If she's here, she can expand on it. I think she touched on it earlier. It falls under the asset managers. So currently, when you look at the company information sheet, you would choose asset managers to get the private equities. And this is something that we picked up in the workshop for investment providers, that maybe it's causing confusion. And we have to look at the name because we have it on level 1 as the industry, as we had the asset managers and the CIS and hedge funds separate. And that we maybe with the asset managers, it created some confusion. Look at how we actually name it, or the naming convention there of going forward. But the private equities fall under asset managers currently.
Thank you, Juanita. And Martha is joining us. So Martha, please go ahead.
Thanks, Charene. Can you hear me?
Martha, I can hear you. Martha, you're muted. Just unmute.
Okay, thank you, Charene. Yes, when you go to the asset managers sheet, you'll note that the different type of asset managers are indicated there, and then also it depends on the on the type of asset manager that you are. For example, we have a hedge fund manager, you have also private equity manager. So the asset manager sheet differentiates between the different license categories. The first one being, sorry, I'm trying to open the sheet here. The first one, it refers to a discretionary FSP. Second one being a hedge fund. And then we also have the administrators. That's your third-party administrators like your Insurers and Maitlands. We also have Cat 3 FSPs, and lastly, the private equities. Like we mentioned previously, and like Juanita said, we're looking at refining these categories. So that's where they fall in under the asset managers sheets. Thank you, Charene.
Thank you very much, Martha. That helps. I'm trying to pick up all the questions. So there's quite a few questions around UMAs, and I think Juanita has touched on that. So if we need to customize it further and look at making it more user-friendly from a UMA perspective, do please give us the comments and the suggestions and engage us if you want more individualized engagements. We'd be very happy to participate in such conversations and look forward to your comments to help us to customize it. And that's true for any other comments from any other sector. Then there is a question around simplifying the report for foreign FSPs. I think the question that we need to ask then for foreign FSPs is, what would you find difficult to respond to, and why would you find it difficult to respond to? So if I could ask that when you are commenting, you provide us with concrete examples and suggestions as to why it would be very difficult for you to respond to something, so that we understand the context, because a question like this in a workshop is very quick, and it's not always easy to give you a proper response and take into account your specific concerns. So I think engage us or provide us with comments so that we understand the situation better. Then there's questions about why we ask for financial advisor rather than financial services provider. We were starting to standardize the terminology towards the terminology that you will see in the COFI bill, to also start the preparation for the future. So that's the context why we have that differentiation. But again, you're most welcome to make comments around that. Paul, I see you have your hand up, so please go ahead.
Charene, this is a question for Juanita again. In terms of business composition retail, question 2.7, you asked state the average cost to the customer to use the channels below to give an instruction to the entity. I'm not entirely sure how one goes about answering that. If it's face-to-face at business premises, do I have to take the hourly cost of the individual who's coming to visit me? If it's a self-help portal, do I need to take the cost of them having Wi-Fi and fiber and what have you? Or are these additional charges that I have over and above the customer's own costs of interacting with me? Can you please comment on that?
Thank you, Paul, for that question. So for the bigger entities, it would be easier for them to work it out in terms of the engagement of the customer with them and the actual cost for that time. So face-to-face at business premises would be the cost of my advisor having to spend the time, and because you're going to cost it somewhere. You're going to put in that cost about what it costs for. So it's a cost to the customer that you will work in somewhere. If it is on the portal of the website and it is their data that they need to use, so on average, how long does it take them to engage you on the portal? I actually had an experience yesterday where they have this robo-advice, and you go to the website and the self-help function is there. And you can actually do it USSD as well, but then you can only ask one question at a time. Then it takes you back again. Then you have to press again a category, then go down. And it's actually a follow-up question on the other question, but they throw you out and then you're queued. And if you're queued too long, they throw you out again. So that would be my costs as the customer that I would be carrying either on the website or on the mobile application. You'll be able to work it out in terms of how long does it take on average for a query to be resolved in terms of what is that cost in terms of data. It is estimated, and this is a very difficult question, we understand. Where it came from is when we were looking at customer outcomes and the work, there's a CGAP, which is a team from the World Bank, and they came to South Africa and they did this engagement actually with some FSPs, insurers and banks. And they did the exercise to see what kind of measures can we put in there to see if there's really a culture of trying to assist the client, because especially if your client is lower income and it's costing them a lot to actually engage you. And you'll see on the governance question sheet, we also have the question about, do you have any free channels available to them? Call me back. Because I'm thinking of the smaller entities, you might not have a toll-free number, but do you have the option of them sending you an SMS and you're calling them back, or sending you a message in any other way, like an email, and you will actually call them back and carry the costs? That is what we're trying to see there. Here, if you want them to carry the cost, what is that average cost? How long does it take them to resolve this issue with you? This will take a lot of time, work and effort. This is not something that we expect you to have on hand. It's something that we know can be done because we actually tested this question except through the CGAP team with the different industries. We also tested in our engagements. I tested it specifically with quite a few insurers to see can they work it out, and yes, they have much better systems and technology to do so. So I can see how that could be maybe very difficult for a smaller entity to do, but then we're very open to suggestions to how can we ask this question, or what indicator can we use for us to know that you do take into account how long it takes for a customer to resolve this query with you and what it cost to the customer was. And then, like I said, link back up to the question on governance. Do you have any toll-free or free type of ways for a customer to engage with you or not? And that will very much, I mean, link up to who's your target market and do you need it or do you not need it type of scenario. We're very open to other suggestions here, but that is the question and the indicator that was used in the survey that was done in South Africa. And it seemed like that could be answered with some work over years, but it is possible. And in the survey, if I can just mention, there were bigger and smaller entities that they used, not just across the sectors, but also in terms of size. Thank you.
Thanks, Juanita, for that clarity. Thank you, Juanita. Can I just comment? I take the point that the larger entities would have more resources to calculate and so forth, but possibly that's something that the authority could provide guidance for the smaller, the one-person type entities, because there's certainly the cost of creating the channel, such as a call center, but there's also the cost that when I make a phone call and I'm put on hold for 35 minutes before I get to an operator and they get sent to another one, whether that's tracked in terms of it's not only the cost of my mobile phone or the telephone call, but it's also my actual time that I'm spent wasting before I can get through to an operator. So I think if you can provide some guidance on that or get insight from the larger entities, that would be very beneficial. Thanks.
We can definitely look at that. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Juanita, you had a question earlier this morning, so I'm just trying to pick up on all the questions that we haven't touched on in some way or another. And you asked for the difference between fees and charges, and I looked at the terminology sheet now just to check, and we didn't define that specifically. So that would be the normal usage of the difference between fees and charges, and often fees are the agreed upon fees, especially in the advisor environment, and then charges are those charges for delivering the service and not an advice fee, for instance, as a specific differentiation. So the charge of submitting a form is R5, as an example, but for the advice fee, we calculate it on the amount of professional knowledge that goes into providing you with a specific advice report. But Juanita, if you want to expand on that, please go ahead.
Thanks, Charene. You always explain things so very nicely and calmly and in detail. But if I can maybe just for some clarity also say, if you look at the all conflict of interest sheet, you'll see that we have a question there in 3.7 that refers to fees. And we've broken it down there into various fees. The same in 2.3 on that same sheet. So if you look at the conflict of interest sheet and we define every one of those fees, those are the fees that we have in mind that would be reported in the all business composition sheet. And then charges, like Charene said, would be more additional charges that you're asking for additional services that you're giving that is not part of the product or in terms of any other agreement that you have with the other product provider, like for making photocopies or giving extra advice in terms of calling a towing company or doing, I don't know, there's various services these days that are being offered. There's a lot of brokers having their own loyalty programs that's totally separate from the product provider who they're selling and giving advice on behalf of. And there is a certain charge to that. That's not part of the premium. And you can't say that is a fee because it's not a part of your advice giving. It's a loyalty program that you have and they have to pay that membership fee, for lack of a better word now, on a monthly basis. But to guide you on what fees we mean there, you can look at the conflict of interest sheet. And that's the thing. And I said it yesterday too in the workshop, and I'll always say it. So Paul and you guys that have been in yesterday's workshop must bear with me, but this is really a story that is being told. It is not just a form that you're filling in and it's going into a deep dark hole and no one is doing anything with it and it's just being archived. This is a return that you're filling in. And if you look at how the questions follow through the sheets, and that's what we were trying to explain in the webinars and trying to explain in these workshops, how they interlinked with each other and how you can then see, you can't look at one indicator on its own. You have to follow it through. And some of them are there for us to do some checking. We need to see if you say most of your income is coming out of fees, what fees is it and what type of business are you in? Why is most of your income not out of premiums received, which would fall under money on the all business composition sheet? What is happening in the industry? Why is certain services being offered by a part of the industry where we wouldn't expect it to be offered? We would expect it somewhere else to be. In some industries, the fees aren't regulated. And there's no caps. And we thought that the industry would actually kind of manage themselves due to competition. And we've seen that that's not the case. There's a vast difference in what is being charged to a customer, and the customer wouldn't know that. They don't do this type of research. They don't have time for that. And that is what we need to see and trying to get that information. And that's why we're actively going to use all the information we have in here to not just measure your business, but the industry, to do benchmarking, to see the entire customer journey. But for you, it would be interesting to see how we link up certain things to also check compliance and to then inform our way of supervising and inform who do we need to speak to, why do we need to speak to you. I personally always think it's better to be closer to the authority than far from the authority, because you can explain things to us. Coming back to that point of the UMs, explain it to us and help us so that we can all benefit from this return. We believe that you can, but if you think we can do it better, then tell us how to do it better. But again, I went off the point. The fees is in the conflict of interest sheet.
Thank you, Juanita. That's a very good explanation. And while you were talking, I was looking at that, and it is a very good breakdown of what the fees could include, and that will probably point you towards that. The next part of your question, Juanita, was just whether if the FSP is a motor dealer and a non-mandated intermediary, do you have to select both? And yes, it does. It doesn't change the questions. So the reason why we're asking you to select everything there, it's the level 3 on the company information sheet that we're referring to, is to help us get a better sense of what it is that you are doing. We don't always understand all the various activities and functions that an FSP or another entity that is licensed by us is performing, that you might be doing various things, some of which are regulated and some of which are not regulated. So that will help us there. And I see comments are coming through, so please just bear with me while I go down and see what have we missed while we still have a couple of minutes left. I think we've dealt with the asset manager, the CAT 2 and 3 issues. Gerald, you are saying that it's very difficult for you to make the split and respond to the questions. We note that. We'll look at the questions, and please, if you are providing us with additional comments, do make that point again so that we don't miss it when we are looking at the various questions. There are some questions about the costs. Rory, you're asking whether wouldn't your cost also be dependent on what a professional financial advisor charge out rate is, assuming you have an hourly rate? And yes, I think that would definitely play a role there. Anne-Marie, you are saying, having said and done all of this, you appreciate our thoughts and efforts. Thank you very much for that. We are sympathetic, and we really do invite you to contact us, and please don't think that if you contact us we are going to be picking on you as an entity. We are definitely not doing that. The intention of this and the intention of the engagement forward is so that we work on this together. I think we've made the point a couple of times that we see this as a journey, not as an event, and we're not going to be walking on this road if we do it on our own. This is not a solo exercise. It is a joint exercise. The more we collaborate, the more we understand one another's positions, the better we'll be able to reach a common ground that we all get value out of, because at the end of the day, we need to get value out of that. Then there is a question from Fred. What protection do you get as service providers against dishonest customers who set a knock-on effect, knowing they have a whole lot of authorities who rather take their part? I think that's always been a concern, that FSPs and other entities might be the victim of unscrupulous customers. Unfortunately, it does happen. Hopefully, it doesn't happen that often. We do our best to assist you. And if you talk to us about the specific concerns that you have, then we could look at how we can best cater for that. I unfortunately can't give you a specific response, but to say that do speak to us so that we understand what are the challenges that you are facing, and then see what role can we play as the regulator to assist you with that as well. And Gerald, you are asking where to leave our comments. So Akashan, maybe could I ask you to just share your screen and show people where to host the comments. So we're going to be doing a screen sharing for you just now. So while we're doing that, I see Charene would like to ask a question. So Akashan, could we give Charene access and go ahead with that while you are just finding the spot to show people where to post their comments. Charene, you should be able to unmute and go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry, I've got laryngitis, but can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry about my voice. I do not have the function for leaving comments. I've been looking through the Excel spreadsheet, and coming from a sole proprietor with one representative, I find this is going to take a long time. How long time will this take to complete? Some of these questions are quite difficult. For instance, under 1.17, you ask state the number of financial advisors providing services to you during the breakdown period. So that's difficult. I now have to write down every time somebody calls me what their race is, for instance. Secondly, you ask questions where you want me to answer yes or no, but it asks for a numeral. So I don't know, I don't know how to explain myself, but some of these spreadsheets aren't very clear. Sorry about my voice.
No problem, Charene. It's winter, we understand. So Charene, I actually want to ask you, don't you want to give me a call sometime where we could have a discussion just looking at your specific concerns? That might be easier for you if we take a couple of the sheets and go through some of the questions. I understand that if you are completely on your own and you don't have external assistance, this can be a very daunting exercise to participate in. And if you're looking at the questions, you haven't answered questions for a while, or maybe you're a fairly new FSP, you didn't do compliance reports in the past, this can be daunting at first and even second glance. We are going to have lots and lots of guidance. We are planning to have a lot of guidance sessions during the next year for especially our smaller entities who might find this a very difficult task, not excluding larger entities, of course. But we will be having a very specific focus on the smaller entities to try and help you. And you might be a very good candidate for participating in our pilot project, not to put pressure on you, but we really want the sole membership entities or the smaller membership entities to also participate, and not just the larger entities, so that we can really test and see what are you struggling with, what can we do to make it easier for you to respond properly to the question, so that you have the information available and that you can translate the information into the data that we're asking for. Then I think the second part of your question was that if you're trying to answer the questions as they are on the spreadsheet right now, some of the data fields don't work. We acknowledge that the purpose of this spreadsheet is not as much about you being able to answer the spreadsheet right now, but for you to get a sense of the kind of questions that we are proposing to ask. So there are some of the response fields that are not really in an answerable format, for want of a better word. It was really just so that we could make the questions available for you to take a look at. What Juanita's also explained earlier, and people might have missed that with load shedding, etc., is that we're not expecting you to be able to respond to the questions right now. So some of the data is in a data format that doesn't make sense if you look at the question that is answered or being asked. So it really, again, was just so that you get a sense of all of the questions. We're not customizing it at this stage yet. Customization is going to be something that we will look at in the future once we've tested the questions with you. But I think Juanita wants to come in at this stage just before we show you where to leave your comments.
Yeah, so the only thing I wanted to add there is when you do get the updated Omni CBR in December, then the fields will be ready for you to use and look at whether it's formatted correctly, because then we want those type of answers. Almost all the questions are numbers, you're right about that, but there is quite a few, especially on the governance sheet, which I mentioned before. The way the question is going to be yes, no, or non-applicable, and that's the type of things that you'll need to type in, and there'll probably be a drop down, and you'll just choose that because it's easier then to pull the report and do the analysis if everything is the same. So there's not going to be long descriptions that you're going to give right now. Long descriptions is if you did say that there was a change in your board and you want to explain something to us, the only free field that there will be is in the comments block at the end of each sheet. The same as with wherever you choose other on the sheet, we ask you to please specify in the comments section at the end of the sheet, and that is where it's free field, and you'll make notes to us to explain what is other, so that we can also see if you choose a other distribution channel or a other product or other in any of the questions, what is the other that you're referring to, and for us to track that over time to see whether we need to bring that into the return. That's only now after the return is finalized. We're not changing anything now, but after that, it's a living document that we have to review on an annual basis and see that it's still relevant to the market. And if we see there's a growth in a certain part of the market, like what we saw in COVID now with the growth of USSD and mobile applications, then we add it as a distribution channel because we can pick it up through those comments. In terms of what you're asking about 1.20 and the financial advisors and in race, no, it's not that you need to write down every time someone calls you in for a query. This is more the ones that you have been contracting with, because this is about what we're testing here is your transformation process and where are you in transformation and inclusion. And we need to know that and you need to know that. And also so that we can see at industry level, where are we really lying with the different sectors in the industry? And then the size of the entities in the industry, where are they lying in terms of that? And that's why an overall view won't give us that type of information. We need to ask it per entity level. So it's the financial advisors that you actually have contracts with that we're asking this. Whenever there's a raised question is when you have that contract already in place, because we want to have a look at the transformation process. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. Akashan, can you share your screen so that we could just show people where to go for the responses?
Okay, thanks, Charene. Okay, so on the FSCA's website, you will go to regulated entities and click on e-services. And then there is the tab that says comments portal, and then you put in your email address and password. So if you're already registered, you can use, if you're already registered on any of the sectors for submissions, you use the same email address and password. If you're not registered, then you register and then you'll be able to submit your comments.
Thank you very much, Akashan. We have run out of time and it's been a very intense and I hope a useful session for you. We've received a couple of questions about when and where will you find the recording of this. So we are busy working with our ICT. We are going to department. We will have 7 workshops in total. Our last workshop is next week on Tuesday with the banking and payment provider section. And then our ICT department is going to take a look at all 7 of the workshop recordings and see if it is from a data perspective possible to host it on the FSCA YouTube channel. So if we are able to host the workshops, then we will be able, we'll do that after the 12th of July. So I think in the interest of fairness, let's say from about the 15th of July, it will then be available on the FSCH website, the YouTube channel. If for some reason we are unable to do it from a data size perspective, then we will prepare a frequently asked question document and host that and notify you of that. But first prize, I think, is the workshops, because you get the interaction and you also will get the chats on the site. We've had some questions about that as well. If you have more questions, if you want to participate in the pilot project, please contact either myself or Juanita or both of us, and we will happily engage you with that. Thank you so much for your time and attention on a Friday. We really appreciate your assistance, and we look forward to many more engagements about this with you. All the best and have a good weekend. Thank you.